So this is a questions and answer session. Jonah, I see you're raising your hand. Turn the microphone on.
Yes. Can you
Great.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
So my question is that I am just my head and you're talking about things happening with the head. I'm not finding that. I can't be in both places at once.
Yeah,
Uh,
start with one. It may be quite normal, especially if you overthink it. Because when you actually don't think and you let go, if we put the skeleton on its back and we start to move the pelvis, you will see the head is starting to do it by itself. However, because we have some tensions and habits, movement will be splinted and it won't be happening. If you find, and I bet you're not the only person here who felt that, start just with your pelvis, switch back to the head. If you find that navigating both is too difficult, go just with your pelvis and permit anything that happens to happen with your head. I can guarantee that your head will start moving. It might take a week, it might take a month, but I'm telling you, your head will just be going just simply, and there'll be nothing to it.
Great.
Thank you for question. Eugenia, I've heard you had some struggles with the middle back.
When we were starting to move side to side and then come up to a sitting position, that my mid back hurt.
Your mid back. Could you repeat the beginning, because I could not register. When you came up from the position,
towards the end of the session, as we were starting to go side to side and then start to sit up, I noticed that the muscles in the middle of my back are feeling very achy.
It's possible. I'm wondering, did you feel difficulty when you interlaced your fingers and lifted the head toward the end of the session? Because that could have overstretched your back muscles.
A little bit, not much.
Not much. It could have been some twists in the transition where your pelvis were in one direction relatively to your ribs, that I'm anticipating that this is most likely muscle spasm. Okay. And what I would suggest, two things. One is you could lie on the stomach for a moment, for like 5-10 minutes. Just be on the stomach. You can put some pillows under your belly, hands on the forehead, under the forehead, and resting in this position to give muscles of your back a little bit of a slack time, because it's possible that they got in spasm and now they need to be just reassured that you're not going to overstretch anything. Okay. And another thing is applying maybe ice or heat just for 10-15 minutes. You could do it actually during that position while lying on the stomach with.
Okay.
Try that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Nikki, you have your hand up. I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, Mary. I absolutely love your anatomy lesson.
Love the anatomy. It's fantastic.
I love it.
Great.
But I am an old lady, 78. I had extensive Feldenkrais training back in late 90s, early 2000. Health took a dip. By 2017, I'd stopped exercising. By 2015, I'd stopped exercising. I now have osteoporosis. I'm a minus 2.6 in my left hip, minus 3.0 in the femoral neck. I've had 3 compression fractures this past year. One of them fairly recently at L1. I do have some pain in my right side, a little more extensive this last month, but I am keeping the movements to a minimum and doing some visualization in parts of it. I know it's really hard for you at a distance to tell me what my risk is, but
we are not going to do lessons that will compromise that. There are some Feldenkrais lessons, especially when we go in the massive flexion. So for example, the last sequence of lifting the head, if you have a very vulnerable spine, even sneezing could break it. the movements of flexion, of forward bending, are usually ones that pose a problem or potential risk of fractures.
Yes, and my fractures were spontaneous.
And they were spontaneous fractures. So the lessons that coming up will not have a lot of forward bending. We're not going to bring elbows and knees or any kind of toe touching movements. So they should be safe to you, but I'm glad you have all that years of training in the method, that you know that you don't need to do a lot in order to benefit, that you can move back and forth between the imagery. Like, what would it feel like? What would it feel like to move the pelvis, to do a small movements back to the imagery? And it can be very, very productive. And slowly.
I have not done a lot with Feldenkrais over the years until basically this past year. I've gotten really into it again, not doing so much, but just, you know what I'm saying? Just becoming much more familiar again.
Wonderful idea. You know about Ruthie Alone, Bones for Life.
Do you know, I took some Bones for Life back shortly, probably in the early 2000s. I don't remember, I didn't take the whole thing. I just took some classes from a woman who'd been trained in it.
But some movements of that could be valuable to you, right?
Well, I've wondered about the heel taps or the heel bumps. And again, I've kind of wondered how I can't probably use much force with those.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you need to drop from the real height, maybe just from a millimeter and back. But it could be possible that it's best to work with your doctor and say, run things like this with your doctor to see if they're feeling safe.
Do you know, I'm not really working with a doctor now, because after the thoracic fracture T11 a year ago, the doctor wanted to do kyphoplasty. And I chose not to do it. So she basically didn't want to deal with me because I wasn't willing to do the treatment she'd suggested. So I've just kind of pulled back, and part of it was I have an autonomic nervous system problem, and I didn't want to risk the surgery. So
makes sense. Thank you, Nikki. Let me take some other questions. Andy.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. Andy.
Hi, Marek. I really loved this lesson like everyone else, and I particularly enjoyed the dancer's lesson that you taught us, the magic of being on the top of the pyramid, the apex of the pelvic half and the femur bone. And so at the beginning of your anatomy theoretical lesson, I kind of felt like, oh, this is a similar expansion of the other lesson from my understanding. And so my question is, I'm healing from a little like lower back injury from ballet, and the previous lesson that you had for dancers being trying to find that magic spot on the top of the pyramid. How do I integrate that is the question with these hula hoops. It seems like it's a similar
idea, but you actually moving around the highest point, because the highest point, as I explained during the dancer workshop, because here's our femur, right? That's a femoral head, and it's a sphere. And that sphere has the highest point, a one magical point where you discover you feel like goddess, like God. You stand upright, your center of gravity is supported by your skeleton, and you feel light. What happens for most of us is that we start to sag. Like, imagine a parent holding a kid on the side while cooking at the same time, with the hips sashaying. What happens is that the whole femur goes a little bit out to the side, and then instead of the highest point, now the new highest point is somewhere here, which is not the highest point, because as you see, this is like a windshield wiper. It has a point where it's the tallest, and then if you go too far in or too far out, you lose your height. What we're doing with hula hoops, we're actually going all around that highest point. So we're not visiting it necessarily. This particular lesson and this particular assignment was more to discover that the pelvis, the whole pelvis, can be in front of our feet, to the left of our feet, behind our feet, and it can be also over our feet. By doing circles, you're finding out what the middle is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Esperanza. Sure. Esperanza, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Merrick.
Yeah.
I really like this class. However, when at the beginning of the class, I have like a lot of pain in my tailbone, and I have an injury there because of a car accident. So as I was doing the exercises, moving the pelvis. I noticed that when I go to the left, I feel the tension on the left side of the pelvis. And I really feel like a pulling. And on my left side, I have knee surgery and I have also a problem with my left foot. So I just want to know how, by doing the exercises, do I need to do like a modification when I move in the pelvis, or I should continue in the way that you're saying the class? I don't know.
I would say that if the coccyx tailbone was fractured, there will be a sensitivity or guarding, the natural guarding of your nervous system away from leaning. So going, like, for example, to 6 o'clock, it's going to be a potential trouble. Even if you don't have the trouble, your nervous system know that I broke it at some point, so I'm not going to go there. And therefore, you will be a little bit doing yes and no at the same time. I would say if you could for sure make a lot of padding, so there is no mechanical pressure on it. Sometimes there are even donuts that you could put, that your tailbone will never touch the floor, that you will put a donut that it supports the sides of your sacrum and ilium, or maybe like even two, if you put 2 towels, one for each ilium, but the tailbone is inside the dip and not pushing anything, I think you should be able to do these movements. The second part is, so this is mechanical pressure. The second part, it could be that just as your hip adductors, those muscles in the inner thighs, can pull your pubic bone. For example, right now, as I'm doing this, my left adductor is pulling my pubic bone and turning my whole pelvis to the left. The same thing are the muscles in the back. There are short muscles, rotators of the hip within the buttock, like piriformis muscle, like quadratus femoris. There's 6 of them, of muscles that do the job of pulling. And it is possible that you were using those muscles that attach to the tailbone and sacrum, and that movement was irritating them. In that case, what you do is you do it much smaller. You do it so tiny that it's barely, like you should feel like you're wasting your time.
Okay.
All right, Judy.
Thank you.
Hanya had a question, but she left. So Judy is next.
Hello, Marek.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, I have a hula hoop in the house. Would that be good? Would that be good to practice with it, or you really want us to do in slow motion and very carefully?
Slow motion first. Do it with precision, because then again, it becomes external. Your objective is to keep the hula hoop, and how you do it, it doesn't care. You could be grinding your teeth, holding your breath,
Okay.
and then you will feel worse than ever. So, of course, if you enjoy it, if you're a master of hula hoop, you could talk to me at the same time, go wow, 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 wow. Then maybe all right. But I would say probably do it with a microscope of internal sensations and feelings. So I would say don't substitute that. Hanya, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to ask exactly. I was touching my adductors and they were working, but they seem to be working very little. So I think that I do more the movement of the pelvis with other muscles, and you've answered that they're the ones in the back.
Yeah, it could be. There are adductors are internal rotators, but there are also those muscles in the back. Some of them are internal rotators, some of them are external rotators, but we always we are like a huge orchestra, right? With many musical instruments. So you can dominate it with one instrument, or you can dominate with another instrument. But when nothing dominates, but everything harmonizes, then it feels like gorgeous. It feels like you're in a state of flow. So when you're feeling like, oh, my butt is getting tired or spasmy or tensing, lower down your intensity, permit yourself not to make it perfect, be okay with kind of doing fairly well. Feldenkrais, so many times he instructed people, do it poorly, do it in an ugly way. Don't strive to be like this model good student. Don't fail. Enjoy yourself failing. Richard. You are muted. I'm asking you to unmute.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
So upper trochanter. Those are the ones on the outside.
Trochanter is this bump here.
So I started the lesson with soreness on both sides and a little bit of that IT band stuff too. Feels a lot better now. Does that make sense? Or, I mean, is that, it's all related?
Greater trochanter, the reason why this bump is so pronounced is because the super strong muscles are attached. This is the point of attachment. It's like gorilla's eyebrows. The reason why they are so huge is because the gorilla has a huge head that weighs a lot, and they don't carry themselves so upright like us, but carry themselves forward. So the muscles that pull the head back make those bones huge. This for us is this kind of some nice voice of a baby.
Yeah, that's my grandson. We're watching him.
Hey, grandson.
Lovely. Yeah. His hips are doing very well.
Oh, hey.
He's working on the hips. He's working on his hips.
We are going in the next 4 sessions. We're going to revisit developmental progression. We're going to do what your grandson is doing, because actually, if you look, I get goosebumps when I talk about it. When you look at development of baby hip, when baby is born, their hip are terrible. They are misfits. It's like a square that fits in the shallow cup. It's terrible. It's not used for you. Sorry that I'm talking about you. He looks a little bit old.
That's what I'm telling him. We're talking about you.
So and the ball is not a ball. It's kind of like a fist, like a square almost. It's terrible for weight bearing. It's at the wrong angle of inclination.
That's why they don't walk.
Within months, through what babies do, lifting the head, blah, 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 rolling over, starting to move the spine from side to side, pulling one leg, the other leg, doing the creeping, amphibian movements, coming on all fours, rocking their tush back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What babies do, they are forming a fantastic hip joint that becomes something that can hold them, make them walk, jump, and run. So yeah, I'm glad we had visitors from younger. And you were
he didn't listen to the whole lesson.
Greater trunk.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The greater trochanter is the place of attachment of many muscles, like gluteal muscles. Gluteus medius attaches there, which is a very powerful muscle that keeps our pelvis stationary. Hip rotators attached there. So it's a place where sometimes tendonitis, when there is inflammatory process, when there is too much strain, those muscles are fighting, like that bad orchestra that one plays too hard and the other tries to play harder because it's my turn now, and they're fighting and they're colliding. Then those tissues become angry, and our greater trochanter becomes inflamed. And there is also a bursa there that often gets inflamed, and you cannot lie on it because it's so tender. And so it makes sense. You moved your pelvis, you rocked it, you rolled it, you moved a little bit, and that tissue gets better. So good job. All right, Peter, we'll have 2 more questions. Peter and Robin.
Just me, please.
Hi, Marek.
Yeah, Peter first, Robin second.
Yeah, during this question and answer period for the last 10, 15 minutes, I find myself sort of micro hula hooping the whole time, and it feels good.
Wonderful.
So should, continue doing this during, so it would be many minutes during the day that I would be doing that.
It can be, but just then don't overdo, because if you muscle it and you make yourself do this, if it happens spontaneously, fantastic, because
I mean in a very small kind of, a very circular, flowing kind of an easy way.
Beautiful, beautiful. Stationary fixed positions are not good for us, because we are creatures of movement. We are not creatures of being locked in one position. So even as I'm sitting here, if somebody counted how many times I fidgeted and shifted, this is part of even blood going into the muscles that are trapped under the cushion, right? If I just sit, there'll be less blood, there'll be less circulation, there'll be less healing. So being always in movement, a great idea. Robin, this will be our last question for now.
Okay.
No, the other way. I had you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Hi.
Yeah.
New Yorker, now in Lakeland, Florida.
Okay.
Could you speak to, when we are doing these gentle exercises, could you speak to how we should be breathing our breath?
Yeah. With a simpler movement, like tilting the pelvis back and forth, when you go forward, when the belly spills forward, you inhale. When you tilt pelvis back to flatten, you exhale. It gets a little bit more complex as you're starting to make movements in the circular way, because sometimes the circle is slower than your breath. Or if we make, like at the beginning of the lesson, my first instruction was to make the nose go in the fast circular way. You won't be able to then match it, like inhale, exhale, exhale, exhale. And therefore you need to breathe independently. But with these basic movements of forward and back, when you're spilling belly forward, the abdomen gets big. This is the time for diaphragm to inhale, and then flattening back, exhale.
What part of this is, when I was working in Pilates, I found that bringing my knees up to my chest, the left leg, and this was before I had a knee replacement, like 5 years ago, I found that the left leg, the lower part of the leg, the femur could go up, squarely, but the lower part of the leg was doing this.
Was rotating?
But yeah, so
yeah.
This was the lower part of the leg.
It's a classic. It's a classic. When a patient comes to me or a student comes to me, and I even don't know what's wrong with them, if I see that they're sitting and one of the leg is outward, like splayed outward,
not the femur, but the leg.
Yeah, but it can be that the leg will go then inward.
Yeah.
But if you have you're bringing knee to chest, the knee can come here, but the foot will migrate either inward or
That's
out.
Exactly it.
Most often the tibia, your shin, your foot will go inward, which means this is external rotation. Your hip joint is externally rotating.
Okay.
It's trying to deal with some traffic jam within the hip joint. Sometimes it's a swelling within the hip joint that will make the person sit with the legs splayed like a frog out to the side.
Right.
So this is the rotational movement that, yeah. I'm
also one of those people that, unfortunately, because my left leg has had all the problems. I was an athlete as a kid. I put all my, when I'm standing and not thinking, I put all my weight on my right leg.
Mm-hmm. The hula hoop will help. The hula hoop, the part of hula hoop is to get more even on both legs, and not forcefully, but through the gentle practice.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Excellent. I'll see you all, or maybe not all. Some of you came only for the first free session. I'll see you next week. Happy practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merrick.
You're very welcome.